So our sweep command is a combination of our extrude and our revolve. Our extrude, we were basically stacking things right on top of each other, or we could have it follow a diagonal line or some form of path in order to go in some different direction. And our revolve was we were taking the post-it notes and we were kind of splaying them out so that they were kind of turning as they were being stacked in order to create a curve. In this case, for a sweep, we're going to be taking any given face. So in this case, I've got this I-beam here, and we're going to be stacking post-it notes. We're going to be thickening it along some path. So we need a guideline and we need to have our face. Our sweep command we can find right up under features. We have the sweep command right there. And again, we're selecting a face and we're selecting a direction, a curve to follow, and we get our sweep. Now this first one is not terribly interesting. It's just a straight line going straight out, but we can do a bunch of other things with it. We can follow a diagonal line, creating a stack of post-it notes kind of going in an angle. We've got that curved I-beam. So we see that we're following that and our diagonal line is going right through there. Or to make things a little bit more interesting, instead of a diagonal line, we can follow a curved line or curved path. So with that curve, we see that we are more or less creating a revolve now, since it was just a regular curve, nothing fancy going on here. We could have done it with a revolve, but the sweep is going to work just as well. A little bit harder to do because we've got to add an extra sketch for it. Now with this, the one thing we can't do is we cannot pull it along a line on the same plane, because at this point, what we're seeing here is we're more or less not creating a volume. We're just sliding the face, and all you would end up with would be a surface, not an overall volume. So it cannot actually construct this. Okay, with this, a little bit on how this works. So I actually have a few lines here. I've got a couple of different arcs that I'm going to look at. And the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a sweep, and I'm going to change my curve to be one of these two. Now, since these two are in the same sketch, we're going to get this little guy here. This is more or less our selection manager. This allows us to select whatever lines or set of lines or individual lines that we need, because we cannot select every line within this sketch. And once we're ready, we can hit the check, and it's going to select those as the path we are going to be following. We'll see that a couple more times here. But look at that. I created a piece, and this is using exactly the same curvature as before, and it is coming out to a different shape. Why is this? Well, why this is, I'm going to show you in a second. I think here we go. Our first one, if we look at the curve that we used, I've got to actually find it here. Let me give this a second here. Let me figure out on the screen. There we go. The second one, if we look at the curve we took, this is the curve that we used to make it. And you notice that this curve starts on this bottom of the I-beam and it stays with the bottom of the I-beam. That is always where it is connected to my overall sketch. Now, if I go to the second one here, and I get this sketch from that, which is not currently visible. So what I have to do here, give it a second. I'm realizing that's not visible. What I have to do here is go in and is sweep forward. There we go. And get there. And now we're seeing that I have, this is the sketch line that I followed. And you notice it starts in the middle, and it is always the middle of the I-beam. So where you draw your sketch in this case, where that path line is, matters, because it's always going to stay consistent for this. And I do this for one more piece. I go ahead and I edit it, and I try to select this outside edge here. But what actually happened is I selected the whole sketch. This is the entire sketch. I didn't see that little box with the check marks, and because I didn't use the check marks, it tried to use the entire sketch, and now I have conflicting 2 lines, and it can't create it. So what I have to do here is I delete this, and I get my selection manager up, and I can go ahead and follow that path, and it's going to work perfectly fine now. You see that the only pink line is the one that I'm following. And this last piece, a little bit off the screen here, but what we're seeing is this path starts at the outside of the eye and it ends at the outside of the eye. It's consistently staying with that outside line wherever I draw my sketch is how the path is going to follow. Okay, now all of these could be created just as easily if I were to use my revolve command. So next thing we're going to jump ahead a little bit to is we're going to grab a new curvature and we are going to create a new group, which is this random little question mark curve. And this is just a grouping of a bunch of different lines, and I can follow them all at once, which again, this could be a revolve here, a revolve here, an extrude here, a revolve here, and extrude at an angle right there. And that would work just as well. However, in this case, I am actually saving probably a decent amount of time because I'd have to create all of those individually, and now I've created everything with one overall line. So that keeps things a little bit easier. What I do want you to notice here is that if I look at this, I have a line right here, a line right here, a line right here, and a line right here. And the same thing goes for the vertical. What's happening is it is creating a different face for each portion of the line. So each of these points is the end of a sketch line within my sketch. And what I'm seeing is it is creating a physical line for all of those at that point. Now that is fine, it looks fine, the volume is exactly the same, but if I want selection or other pieces for those faces, there are times where I want them to all be the same. So what I'm going to go in here to do is I'm going to jump into my my options here, and I can merge the tangent faces. When I go ahead and hit the check mark there, you can see that anything that can be combined by SolidWorks or that SolidWorks thinks it can combine gets combined because of tangent faces, and it becomes a single surface. We got rid of all of those lines there. All of those points have now just disappeared, which is a little bit cleaner. Not anything that's going to be game-changing for you most likely, but something that you can do with this to make a few less lines within your part. Jumping forward here a little bit, what we're going to look at next is I'm going to, instead of following a regular path, I can use some funky spline. This one's just a random sketch I've done. We'll talk about splines a bit later, but this does work for some funky shapes that I probably could not do with just extrudes and revolves. With our splines, we're changing our shape, our curvature as we go, which is not something that either of those would do. We could also do it with various other tools that can move us from straight lines to others. If we wanted to use portions of ovals, if we wanted to use our curvature options, all of those will work. Okay, just the brief reminder that once again, with all of our extrude commands, anything that adds volume, we can also use the inverse. So we have our sweep, add volume, and we have our swept curve, remove volume. And the inverse exists for all of these different pieces. So this is basically followed my path, and we have created a cutout within the shape of the eye curved along here. In this case, I probably could have used revolve cut, but again, this would work just the same as our adding material, just inverted. Okay, one more thing, and probably the most fun piece here. However, easiest to break. So within our sweep, we can select our body, we can select our path, and then we have one extra option here. We have the ability to select what are called guide curves. So I've created this extra guide curve to show how I want the edge of my body to move. And these guys are going to allow you to have your shape change actually. You can have some weird shapes going on as it moves from one place to the next. I will say that these commands tend to be notoriously difficult. They're very finicky pieces, but you can get some of these shape changes. You'll see in another video that's coming up for this class, I have my teapot handle that I wanted to start small and get larger, and that is a way to do that. And I lied, there's one more thing. Within this, we can choose not to use a profile if we want it to make it a little bit faster. If we do have a circular cross section that we're after, we can just choose a circular path, set the diameter of our circle, and it will create that circular path automatically. It doesn't need any second geometry for that. With that, that is pretty in-depth things that our sweep command can do. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Take care.